C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, letter number 1. And I talk about 3 different ways to get the most out of a book. And one of them is to let the book ask you questions. The second is to see yourself in every single character throughout the book. And the third is to discuss it, share it. Have conversations with what you're getting from the book and what challenged you, what inspired you, what encouraged you, what forced you to confront something. Right in the beginning, letter number 1, from this senior devil to the junior devil, Wormwood. He said, I know what you were saying about guiding your patients' reading. Oh, wow. Wow. It forces me to stop and think, if I were a tempter trying to guide my reading, maybe this is a question for you. If you were a tempter trying to guide your own reading, what would you point towards? What would you point towards? What would you point away from? And how's that going? How's that going? Most people that I know, they keep their cell phone closer than any other book. Which, okay, you could say that's good because you can find good stuff in there. Right, but do you? Do you? A lot of people look at their phone before they look at their spouse first thing in the morning. They say goodnight to their spouse before they say goodnight to their phone. You could really, the Bible. The Bible. I mean, I joke with people sometimes that you could call the Bible the not quite as good book. Oh, wow, you can't say that. Well, I say that because it's not quite as good maybe as something else you're spending your time reading. And I say it sort of joking, but at the same time, how would you guide your own reading? What would you guide yourself towards? What would you guide yourself away from? And how is that really going? If you wanted to battle with Uncle Screwtape over the next 24 hours, what kind of reading would you have to put somewhere else? Would you maybe have to shut off your internet connection? Would you have to avoid social media? How would you guide your reading? I mean, that's the first, not even the first sentence. The second part of that first sentence says, take care that he sees a good deal of this one friend, his materialist friend, right? Which friend? Which friend, if you were the tempter, which friend would you tempt you towards? Would you say, make sure that Jonathan spends time with? Make sure Jonathan, or try to guide Jonathan not to spend time with? What conversations would you steer towards or away from if you were the tempter? Oh, this is an amazing, amazing challenge because our relationships, not just our relationships, but how we choose to invest in, participate in those relationships. It takes us closer to or further from our true selves, who we were born to be. It takes us closer to or further from an amazing relationship with our Creator. What a great book. What a great book. At one point they talk about the pressures of the ordinary. The pressures of the ordinary. Make sure that he notices the pressures of the ordinary. You don't realize how enslaved they are to the pressures of the ordinary. In other words, get them hooked on routines that don't matter, that are just essentially busyness. Busyness. I love this statement. Your patient, the human being, maybe you and I, we don't see doctrines as primarily true or false, but as academic or practical or outworn or contemporary or conventional or ruthless. I mean, you could add to that, you could add popular, modern, scientific, he says, jargon, not argument, is your best ally in keeping him from the church. In what way do you maybe not think of ideas, philosophies, doctrines as true or false, but you think of them as, new or old, modern or old-fashioned? today, progressive or outdated? In what way do you use words to get in the way of true and false, to get in the way of right and wrong, to get in the way of good and evil, to get in the way of something I should do and something I should not do? How is that the case today in the world around you? How's that the case specifically for you? For you, right at the end of this chapter, I want to end with one thought. He says, let me end with this. He says, do remember that you are there to fuddle him. From the way some of your young friends talk, anyone would suppose that it was our job to teach. Your affectionate Uncle Screwtape. In other words, you're there to just confuse him. You're there to distract him. You're there to make sure this patient doesn't spend time on what matters most. If you and I step back and look at our calendars, I step back, I look at my calendar. Do I spend more time on what matters most or more time on what matters least? Over the next 24 hours, over the next week, over the next month, over the next month or year? How can I spend more time on what matters most and less time on what matters least? You're there to fuddle him, distract him, get him just spinning, chasing nothingness, guide his reading, guide his relationships, guide his thoughts, guide his relationship with words, guide his relationship with what's true and what's false, and make them more vague, make them more nuanced, if you will, make them more complicated. There's an old expression that says complexity is the enemy of clarity. Complexity is the enemy of clarity. C.S. Lewis, Screwtape Letters, Chapter 1. What challenged you? What inspired you? What questions did that first letter ask in your life?